You're listening to 90.3 WHPC, the voice of Nassau Community College in Garden City, New York. I'm Bill McIntyre here with Jon Gallo for another edition of this week's Long Island News. And now, we are very happy to be joined on the show for the first time by New York State Assembly member Gina Sillitti. Assemblywoman Sillitti has represented the 16th Assembly District, which covers portions of the North Shore of Nassau County, from the Queens border to Great Neck through Old Westbury, since winning her first election in November of 2020, which follows a decades-long career in public service, including working at the Nassau County Legislature and the town of North Hempstead in various important roles. She is also the chair of the Subcommittee on Occupational Licenses and a member of the Assembly Committee on Economic Development, Job Creation, Commerce and Industry, Labor, Local Governments, Transportation, Election Law, as well as Tourism, Parks, Arts, and Sports, in addition to being on the Legislative Women's Caucus and Task Force on Women's Issues.
Certainly, we welcome you, and we thank you again for joining us, and Happy Earth Day to you.
Happy Earth Day. It's my pleasure to be here.
That's right.
Yep,
That's
most
right.
definitely. So we'll get into some of the local environmental issues that I know you're concerned about and passionate about, along with a lot of your constituents. But I guess, as we normally do with folks that we just have on the show for the first time, especially someone like you who kind of joined public service, at least in this level at the Assembly during the pandemic. Can you just talk about how that's been, kind of coming in during such a unique time and, I guess maybe constituent services, which I know you have a strong background in, how that plays during the pandemic to help the community's needs?
Oh, sure. So, when I first decided to run for office, it was February of 2020. Everything was fine. Nothing was wrong with the world. And then next thing you know, everything shut down, of course. And New York was, ground zero, for lack of a better word, of the pandemic. And, so many people lost their lives, and including in our family. I think everyone was touched in some way by the pandemic. And it was an interesting run for office. It's like, hey, run for office, but P.S., you can't talk to anybody. You can't talk to anybody, can't see anybody. Good luck.
Right.
So
enjoy the game.
It all worked out. And started in January, moved into our office and really hit the ground running. Of course, one of the first constituent phone calls was unemployment. And that, I think, was a majority of what a lot of the members were working on, because so many people lost their job. Now, listen, I represent a very nice area of Nassau County, but this pandemic didn't care what zip code you lived in. It affected everyone. Right. And there are pockets of, we have middle class, we have very poor areas in my district, but everyone was affected from the very top all the way down. And so, you mentioned my background in constituent services and working in government. That certainly came into play. I have a really great team with me. It's an office of women, not by choice. It just happened to be that way. And everybody is so compassionate and hardworking. And we really hit the ground running. And it was a tough year. We didn't know what kind of budget we were going to have. New York was hemorrhaging money. Fortunately, we got an influx of cash from the federal government. Thank you, Senator Schumer. And we were able to pay our bills. We were able to pay our local governments, which, is police and fire and all of our first responders and community colleges and, all the things that government pays for. And so it was a tough first year. And so now, we got through that, and now we're sort of looking to the future. How can we help folks recover, whether it's, issues with mental illness, investing in education, of course, investing in our environment, which we'll talk about in a minute, especially after Hurricane Ida, which hit my area incredibly hard. So, looking forward to, bringing New York back. We are the Empire State, and we will be once again.
Yeah, certainly, like you said, a daunting time to join, but also a time with a lot of opportunity to help the community. And like you said, I know people might think, oh, well, this district, maybe it's a higher average median income. Maybe some of these issues don't impact them. But like you said, a lot of folks, whether it be mental health issues, obviously unemployment, and, knowing food insecurity. I know a lot of the great nonprofits, certainly we're in your area too, serving communities, especially, a lot of members of the Latino population, making sure that everyone can get access, regardless of even immigration status, to healthy food during such a difficult time. So that's certainly essential.
100%.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up the food insecurity. That was something that my office really got involved in. We made connections with all the local food pantries and tried to help in any way. And we hosted, food drives. I sent out mailers and had different drop-offs throughout the district. You mentioned the Latino population. Of course, we have Our Lady of Fatima food pantry in Manor Haven, where I live. And then, of course, St. Aloysius in Great Neck, which is a Catholic church over there that does great work, and all over. We have so many wonderful, and they were, front lines. I mean, they went from having, double their people, 100 families to over 200 families. And in the matter of weeks, it was really incredible what these people did. And,
Undoubtedly.
tip of the hat to them.
We had the people from Long Island Cares on. We spoke to them a couple of times. The explosion in the population that was going to avail themselves of this. It was eye-opening. Really was.
It really was. It was. It was. Sad and also uplifting. Seeing everybody come together. Right.
Of course. Always a silver lining during tough times. Like I said, people trying to lift each other up and get through it together. So that said, that does play into not the budget from last year, but the budget for, I guess, going forward into fiscal year 23, which obviously was in the press a lot and got passed in the last week or so after a little bit of, kind of back and forth. But ultimately around $220 billion. A lot of it is the kind of non-controversial items like education, seniors, small business, infrastructure, etc. Obviously, there's some other kind of more hot button issues as well, which we can kind of touch on a little bit too. But I guess starting with the event that the governor had on the island this week, Monday, I believe it was, where she announced about $157 million in investments for Long Island roads and infrastructure, something that we all can, relate to being on the island, the LIE, the Southern State, the Meadowbrook, which is right, obviously, along where the colleges are here. And I think even 25A, as folks on the other side of Queens call it, Northern Boulevard, might be getting some funding. So can you tell us a little bit about that announcement and, kind of, I guess we'll get into the budget as a whole, your thoughts on, kind of the pros and cons?
Oh, sure. So part of the thing that she talked about was Operation Pave Our Potholes, which, by the way, every Long Islander can relate to this. I actually was telling somebody a story the other day. I was driving along on the road and I was like, is that a sandbag in a pothole? Oh. I literally turned the car around and sure enough, there was a 50-pound sandbag in a pothole. That was because it was so deep. Right. That's what they put it in for a temporary fix. It was crazy. So Operation Pave Our Potholes, it's statewide, it's $1 billion, which is an incredible amount of money. 157 of which is earmarked for Long Island. And so in our district, one of the projects that's going to be coming up, which I know my constituents are going to be incredibly excited about, is Northern Boulevard. It's going to go from, Queens all the way down. In Great Neck, especially, it is so bad. And years of temporary fixes almost makes it worse. And it's, you're like off-roading every time you're going down Northern Boulevard.
Oh, yeah, a lot of suspension work.
I know. So it's terrible. So that's on, check, that's on the list of things to do. So very excited about that. But just in general, it makes, you're going to hear the governor use the word historic a lot. Historic investments and historic amount of money. And I really believe that it is a historic investment in infrastructure, in our roads, in environmental projects, like you name it, they're putting money into it. We could talk about, the capital money. It's a $32.8 billion capital program. It's 40% over the last 5-year capital plan. It's the largest infrastructure investment in the history of New York. This is great stuff. And not only is it going to bring, these projects, these transformative projects to New York, it's going to be jobs. It's going to be lots and lots of jobs. And, when you mentioned the governor's press conference, the people that were highlighted there were union leaders. You had the Long Island Federation of Labor. You had the building trades. These are going to be union jobs that are going to bring, we're talking about middle class, strong jobs with benefits, with good wages. And these are the kind of things that are going to lift people up. And that's what we want to do. After the pandemic, we want to lift people up. And I believe that that's what's going to happen with this money.
Okay, and just to another point, I know people obviously care a lot about schools, education, both from a primary level up to, post-secondary, obviously here we're at a community college, which we like to think of as an anchor institute out here on Long Island. So what are your thoughts? I know this year seemed to be, again, record foundation aid. Again, we should, give the caveat that a lot of this is, somewhat based on the fact that we are getting a lot of federal money into the state, obviously, because of COVID relief. Some of it can't be spent on just anything. But that said, thankfully it wasn't as hard, to kind of be, negotiating austerity this time versus, what can we fund? So I guess back to the education point, what are your thoughts? What can constituents be happy about for both, again, the public schools, the high schools, and, obviously our community college and even private colleges, students out here?
Yeah, you got it. So, when you talk about, you mentioned foundation aid, this is the second year of a 3-year commitment by New York State to fully fund foundation aid. So this increase this year is about a little over $400 million increase in foundation aid. It is part of a overall $31.5 billion budget to fund our schools. And there's on Long Island alone, it's a $357 million increase. And what does that mean? I mean, Long Island, New York, but Long Island pays some of the highest property taxes. And what we can do is by funding our schools, by bringing in more of these education dollars, we can hope to, help the school districts with their budgeting and, hopefully less tax increases because it's so hard. It's so hard, to afford the taxes, especially where I live.
Oh yeah, no. Everyone on Long Island knows that taxes is always the perpetual issue, and I know we're going to speak to, and we've spoken in the past, Senator Brooks. I know he has some proposals regarding trying to change some of the funding calculations that I know you've kind of.
He is on the front lines of that, Senator Brooks. Oh my goodness, he is.
If you listen to most Long Islanders, they don't seem to be. I mean, they're upset about it, but the issue is not the real estate taxes; it's the school taxes. That's where it's always.
That's like
falling.
70% of their overall property tax bill.
Right.
Yeah.
Senator Brooks, I mean, he schooled us a little bit on how that works, and that they get commercial real estate money, then they get private real estate taxes, and the state is the other avenue of that. And he's attempting to do is balance that out a little better so that the the taxpayer, not the commercial guy, us, the people who just have their houses and stuff, they don't get hit with the biggest chunk of that, because that's what we do. Yeah. We make up the difference. So from one year to the next, oh my God, how did it go up so much? It's simple math, and
it is. And by the way, try to figure out the funding formula. I mean, it goes back, I'm sure Senator Brooks explained, it goes back a very long time, and nobody knows honestly how it works.
And my understanding is that we're the only ones that do it this way.
If you say that, I'm sure that's right.
Long Island is the only one that does it this way, and you read it in the newspapers every other day of this school's budget and that school's budget. I've been doing this week's Long Island News for quite a long time now, and 1 year we took all those budgets and added them up just to see what kind of money we were talking about collectively, and it's mind-boggling. It is mind-boggling. But
at the same time, people live here, and for the school districts. I mean, we're so, especially over by me. Oh my goodness, we have. Some of the best schools, and, people are moving. We saw a record number of people coming from Manhattan, and they came to my district. And partly, it's a beautiful neighborhood, beautiful communities, but also incredible schools.
Certainly.
And, we certainly pay for it. That's for sure.
to some of the superintendents in your district. We've talked to actually some folks from some of the like arts programs in the district, and knowing that they are, very renowned, and people come from, other places even before the pandemic to, kind of have their kids, have good opportunities in that education system. So certainly we see the balance. Obviously, nobody wants to pay more, but at the same time, we don't want to have a decrease in the quality and excellence of the education.
It definitely needs attention. It needs attention. Somebody needs to look at that, and that's the trick.
Certainly.
Let's change the way that it's funded, but don't touch the quality of the product.
Yeah,
right.
That's
it's a balance.
The threading the needle. But let's remind our listeners that they are listening to this week's Long Island News here on 90.3 WHPC, the radio voice of Nassau Community College. Here with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, thankfully joined still by Assemblywoman Sillitti, who represents the 16th Assembly District out here on Long Island. So, okay, now that we've discussed some of those kind of basic every year issues, I know there were some other issues, like we said, they were a little more hot button. Some of them wound up getting pulled from the budget, like the ADU issue. Obviously, there's a discussion around affordable housing, but basically this was seen as a one-size-fits-all policy that wasn't going to work for Long Islanders, for folks even in the city who were upset about it. So, point is, I guess that could be seen as a sign of progress of the community speaking out and getting some kind of concession through the assembly and through the state senators, I guess. But other things, and your thoughts on that are certainly welcome. But in terms of, let's see here, Tropical Storm Ida, the funding. Again, I know you were a very big advocate trying to get more. I know your district was very heavily damaged. I know that parts of Queens that I've seen in Hollis and in Flushing were devastated, and there was a loss of life and many millions of dollars of property. So maybe we'll start there. Actually,
Sure.
Whatever happened to that? Because to be honest, like I said, it's a big document, and I'm trying to parse out everything, bail reform, all this other stuff, public safety. But what happened with that proposal?
Oh, yeah, sure. So, let's just take a step back. Obviously, of course, everybody's aware of, the damaging rain from Hurricane Ida. And very early on, that first week, I went and just started knocking on doors and talking to people from Great Neck to Manhasset to Port Washington. And I remember walking streets in Great Neck, and somebody said to me, "Don't forget about us. Don't just make it a photo op." And it really struck me, because I didn't think of it that way, but they didn't want me to think of it that way.
Yeah.
And it stuck with me, and I didn't forget about them. And so fast forward to the budget process, I had read that there was a community in upstate New York that had devastating flooding in the Finger Lakes region. And the state at the time set up a relief fund for those folks to help rebuild. I said, well, if we can do that for upstate, why can't we do that for Long Island? And so I brought the speaker to the district in October. So it was still, fresh. And I brought him to Manor Haven. I brought him to Manor Haven because we had terrible mudslides. And I actually found this house. I was driving and I saw mud in the road. I'm like, what is this? And I followed it. And I followed it to this gentleman's house. His name is Hassan Aman. And he was standing in mud in front of his house on the phone, looked very distraught. I introduced myself. I said, I'm a neighbor of yours. I also happen to be the Assemblywoman. What happened? And Manor Haven is below the bluffs of Sands Point. Sands Point is, wealthier area, $1 million homes, nice, very nice, beautiful. And the cliffs that abut Manor Haven, the earth fell with the weight of the rain. And what it did was it flooded roads and homes in mud, if you could believe it. And so a month later, by the way, still now, his home is covered and his property is covered in mud. But I brought the speaker down. I showed him, we're talking 6 feet of packed hard mud. And it stuck with Speaker Heastie. And when it came to budget time, I wrote a letter with a budget request to help these folks to set up some kind of Hurricane Ida relief fund. I asked one of my Queens colleagues, Jessica Gonzalez Rojas, who had the district that had the loss of life, which was horrible. Those people drowned in their own homes, to sign on with me. Of course, she did, because she's a big advocate, and all of Long Island signed on as well. P.S. In the Assembly proposal, we got $50 million, which is what you're referring to. It was in the newspaper, on TV. Yep. And then in the final budget, $41 million. So $41 million is going to be part of the Governor's Office of Storm Recovery that people could apply for. Now, don't ask me about the details because those are still being worked out, but I will be announcing exactly how people can apply, what they need to do, what the parameters are, everything. There's not going to be no shadow. Everybody's going to know about it, and we'll make sure we promote it. I'll let you guys know as well, so we can everybody can know, what the details are to get that relief.
Most definitely. And I just was going to say that I know because, at the time, people were trying to rely on FEMA and other agencies, and, people found out that their insurance companies weren't going to cover a lot of these things. And, the tragedy of it being that a lot of flood insurance, people don't have it because these flooding incidents were inland. And I know that even kind of goes back to the point about ADUs, the concerns that were being raised, where if you have potentially these, accessory dwelling unit apartments and basements, something like that could really have a very terrible outcome, like we saw in some of the illegal basement apartments in Queens. So certainly, we will certainly stay tuned to that and get that information out to the public so that people who were impacted directly can hopefully get some amount of, being made whole, not from the harrowing experience, but at least from, the cleanup and the
just
recovery.
Something, right? It's, FEMA, FEMA was great. They came in, they provided, but what they provide is to get people back to a livable condition, right? So, somebody like, Hassan, who had the mud on the outside, that's not considerable livable. Now, the mud that came into his house, he did get some help with that, but we're talking tens of thousands of dollars. This is an immigrant, came to this country, built this home 30 years ago. He's not a rich person, and this is devastating for him. His life is in this home that he raised his children in, and so it's very sad. So anything we could do to try to help these families, and then you mentioned ADUs, talk about a hot topic. Especially on Long Island.
Just a little, yeah.
Listen, we can't ignore that there's a housing issue. And Long Island, PS, is, to say that there isn't accessory dwellings on Long Island is silly. I lived in one. I feel like it's the rite of passage of every young person on Long Island is to live in some kind of basement apartment.
It's called survival. Yeah, it's called survival.
Right, and it's all you can afford.
Yep.
You don't make a lot of money, and so the problem with the bill is not necessarily the concept of it. It was the mandate. It was saying, ruling from on high that you have to do this, you have to put this in your community. And the things about our villages where my colleagues like to joke, there's 600 villages in New York, and half of them are in Gina's district. I have a lot of villages. I have a lot of mayors. But that's what makes this area so special. And, these villages were built on years of community planning and, meetings. And this is not just willy-nilly type stuff, master plans that were
local
developed
zoning
over.
Control.
Yeah, and developed over decades. And, people want to have say, and especially, in these local villages where they've, planned their communities so well. And so, that has to be looked at again, but not mandate, infrastructure, incentives, something else, but not the way it was done.
Understood. And ultimately, again, all parts of that budget bill, I believe it was like AA through EE of, one of the budget bills were all removed. So for people, at least to our understanding and what's been reported, none of that has been passed. There are standalone bills that were already entered prior to, the budget that basically got pulled into it. Those prospects of them passing, some people will say aren't that great, especially in an election year. at the very least.
And not even that. And the sponsor, we've actually, it unfortunately got very politicized, of course, as, things always do. But, there are a group of people, trying to work things out governmentally. And, the bill sponsor meeting with, people like myself and suburbs to try to figure out, address the housing crisis, but doing it in a way that could be not one size fits all, at like the words that you said, but something that could be worked out for everyone. And so that's what we're trying to do governmentally.
Exactly. Okay, and let's just remind our listeners one more time, we are still here on 90.3 WHPC, the radio voice of Nassau Community College, with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and thankfully just for a few more moments, joined by Assembly Member Gina Sillitti, who represents an Assembly district here on the North Shore of Long Island. Assembly Member, just in those few moments, we'll have to have you back on to get, obviously into a deep dive about a lot of the other things that were in the budget and your other priority, kind of goals for the rest of the session. But in terms of the environment, again, it being Earth Day, and, that plays on what we just talked about with obviously the damage from the tropical storm, as well as, concerns overall with a lot of different things in the area. So point is, what do you see? I know there was the Environmental Bond Act. There was some additional funding. I think voters will still have a say on that kind of policy ultimately at the polls. But what can you tell listeners? I know we're about to speak with Congressman Suozzi, who's got a lot of funding for the Long Island Sound area, and I know you've been advocating for your neck literally of the woods, the Great Neck, Sands Point out further areas. So what do people need to know are those issues that you're working on with folks? I know there's a lot of concerns about water quality, other stuff out here.
Oh, 100%. So I mean, as you mentioned, going to the voters this November, and we're going to need everybody's help, is $4.2 billion for an Environmental Bond Act. And one of the things that I've been working on, it's a combination of economic development and environment, I believe was a win-win. In Manhasset, in a large portion, PS, of the North Shore, we don't have sewers. And it's environmentally unfriendly. You have all kinds of nitrogen going into the bay and ultimately the Long Island Sound. And so one of the things that I made a priority was to try to get funds for this project in Manhasset. And it's very rare that you find a project that not only has every layer of government in favor of, the Chamber of Commerce in favor of, all the civic associations in favor of, plus there was a whole petition with residents and they're in favor of. So basically what this would do is to give money to the Great Neck Water Pollution Control District for infrastructure installation of sewers on Plandome Road in the business district. So what's happening with these local businesses, tens of thousands of dollars to pump out things that we won't talk about on the radio, and of course leaching into the groundwater, going out into our bays. So I mean, it's a shot in the arm for downtown revitalization, and it's beneficial to the environment. So I was able to secure $5 million for this project. I'm Great. So excited about it. As a freshman, you don't always see that kind of dollars. So I can't even tell you how happy I was. And so it was in the paper also recently. So things like that, we're going to be working on, and people are, of course, incredibly happy. But in the environmental bond, we have $1.5 billion for climate mitigation, $1.1 billion for restoration and flood risk reduction, $650 million for open space conservation and recreation, $650 million for water quality projects, increases municipal stormwater grants by $100 million. So stormwater grants, think of after Hurricane Ida, our stormwater system was overwhelmed. We have to address it. Our local municipalities need to address it, but it's expensive. And that's where we can come in and help with some of these funds so the county and the towns and the villages can address this, and we can withstand the next storm, which is not, going to be every 500 years. Unfortunately, we're in a situation where it's going to happen much more often, but we need to be ready for it. And that's what hopefully this budget will aim to do.
Great.
Yep.
Well,
certainly. So we look forward to following that.
Yeah,
and,
we do.
We thank
and
you for your time, of course.
we have
Assemblywoman.
plenty more questions, so we always
Oh,
make
anytime. I mean, listen, I know I could talk a lot.
This
so
is no. This is your
anytime
first
you
time,
guys
so
wanna
we,
get
we
together.
we always get the guests to promise they'll come back. That's all. So
You got it. I'm coming.
and we thank you
We
very
look
much
forward
for
to it. Enjoy the rest of your Earth Day, and take care and be well, and see
Spending
you
your-
obviously around the island.
Yeah,
All right,
right.
you got it. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank
Take
you
care.
very much.
Be well.
Bye.
Alrighty, Bill. So that was a great
Yeah.
interview with the local and state government kind of take, and now we are very happy to welcome once again Congressmember Tom Suozzi. So I know you're going to pull up
Everybody
our
knows
intro over there.
Everybody knows Tom Suozzi, but I have to give him his
Full due,
his
I guess,
propers. Congressman
yep.
Suozzi has represented New York's 3rd congressional district since 2016, which for now consists of portions of the North Shore of Nassau, Suffolk, and Queens counties. He is a member of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee, serving on both the Oversight and Tax Policy subcommittees. He's also the vice chair of the Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, co-chair of the Labor, Long Island Sound, and Quiet Skies caucuses, as well as during his tenure, Tom has served on various other committees, caucuses, and task forces. Congressman Suozzi, as many of our listeners know, also previously served as Nassau County Executive after being the mayor of Glen Cove, and is now running to become the next governor of New York State. You've been around, Tom.
How's it going, guys?
Good. How are you?
Great. Good to see you. Happy Earth
Bill,
Day.
John, nice to see you guys.
Good.
Likewise.
Good to see you. It's been a busy time, huh?
Very busy. Thanks for having me on your show. And yes, I'm running for governor of New York State. I'm giving up Congress. Congress is a great honor and a great responsibility. And I could probably stay in Congress for a long time like the other members of Congress do and keep on getting reelected. But I'm giving it up on a long shot run for governor because I'm so sick and tired of the debate that's happening where everybody's just fighting with each other all the time. I'm concerned about the state of New York with the highest taxes in the United States of America, a growing crime rate in New York City and elsewhere throughout the state. I'm concerned about my party, the Democratic Party, that's just pandering to the far left. I'm sick of the crazy right too, but I wish people would just learn to work together with each other, which I've tried to do throughout my career, to actually just solve the problems. And I think the problems people are concerned about right now are taxes, crime, our troubled schools. Here on Long Island, we got some of the best schools in the United States of America, but we read about Hempstead and Freeport and Roosevelt and even my hometown of Glen Cove, Wyandanch. I mean, it's hard to imagine we've abandoned these kids for such a long period of time. We have to help these kids in these troubled schools. So, and now
Certainly.
the biggest thing now is, the corruption. I mean, we've seen 3 governors leave in scandal. We saw the attorney general, we saw the comptroller, we saw Skelos, we saw Silver, we saw Bruno, and now the lieutenant governor has just been arrested for bribery and corruption. And Ed Mangano, I left out Ed Mangano, oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, can't forget him, of course. So certainly you laid out a lot of the reasons, of course, why you're running for governor, and we certainly want to unpack those a little bit further, Congressman. But just if you can, just because I know this is your final session, and obviously there's plenty of business to be done there. Obviously SALT has always been one of the highest priorities. There's the Biden agenda, like you said, which has kind of been stuck at a standstill because of that infighting and kind of just stuck in the mud kind of, I guess, approach that people see, the Congress as being. So can you just, and the Ukraine, of course, and other foreign policy issues that impact local Long Islanders here. Where do things stand? Just what are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's going to take the whole show for me to talk about that stuff, but let me just start with Ukraine, okay? The Ukraine,
for it. Yeah, go for it.
These people are fighting and dying for democracy. And democracy is politics. And we've got politics here in America, and we're not treating our politics properly. I mean, people are dying for this in Ukraine. And we've sent people to die throughout our history for democracy and freedom. That's politics. And the only way politics works is if the people get involved and the people participate. And we have to be inspired by the Ukrainians that, everybody said, oh, the Russians are going to roll right over them. Well, that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, we can't, when you got to fight for something you believe in, you can't give up. You have to fight for it because you believe in it so strongly. So we have to give them more money for arms, for humanitarian aid. We have to let the Ukrainians that have relatives here in the United States of America bring their relatives from the Ukraine over here. It's a big sticking point in the bureaucracy that, Well, if you can't prove that you're going to go back to your hometown, we can't give you a visa to come to America. Well, you can't go back to your hometown because they just bombed your hometown.
Yeah.
So we're trying to fix that. The president just gave a parole yesterday, which is a big thing. So that's Ukraine. We got to give more money. We got to give them more aid. We can't ourselves go to war. They'll blow up the whole world. But we have to keep the whole Western world united. I mean, this is the Biden doctrine will be that we kept the West united. Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, to some extent, India, Israel. We have to keep the West united against Russia and try and freeze them out economically. That's like a new concept of us all sticking together.
Yeah.
That goes with everything else.
Yeah.
Secondly, is the Biden agenda. We passed the $1.2 trillion infrastructure deal. It was a bipartisan deal. My bipartisan problem solvers caucus helped to get that done.
Mm-hmm.
Even Mitch McConnell voted for it. That guy doesn't vote for anything. So, I mean,
wait a minute. I'm clutching my chest. Wait, you said Mitch McConnell voted for? Wait.
So we got that. We got that done. That's a big thing for long. Look at the Long Island Expressway. The state has totally dropped the ball on the roadways. I mean, it's a disgrace what we see with the roadways. The state is not doing their job. But they're going to get a bunch of money from us, and they can start doing it now. But even with the money that we don't, I'll get to the state in a second. So third is the big Build Back Better deal, which was so important to all of us. So many great things in there. You want to raise taxes, raise them at the federal level. You want to do child care, do it at the federal level. You want to do climate change, do it at the federal level. Do all these big things at the federal level, because if we just try and do it here in New York State, we're going to choke on the fact that we already have the highest taxes in America.
Right.
So these are all good policies, childcare, environment, all these are all good policies. But if we do it ourselves all the time by ourselves, we're going broke, and everybody's taxes are going up, and people don't live in New York State.
We need we need funded mandates, though. We can't have the federal government just telling all us this is what you have to do, and then there's no money behind it. Right.
You got to give us the money.
Yep, definitely.
And finally, SALT. SALT is my big thing. SALT stands for the state and local tax deduction. So important to us here on Long Island, throughout New York State. Trump and the GOP screwed us on it because they knew it would hurt Democratic states that have higher taxes. I fought for it. I got it passed through the House, despite tremendous opposition from the Republicans and even some of the far left Democrats. Got it passed through the House to increase the deduction to $80,000. It got killed in the Senate by Manchin and Sinema when they killed the overall deal. They weren't killing SALT, but they were killing the overall deal.
Right.
And as a result, it's one of the things that inspired me to run for governor, because we've just got to reduce the taxes in New York State. We are losing people. People cannot afford to live here.
Yeah.
Everybody on your call right now on your radio show knows somebody that moved to Florida, somebody that moved to North Carolina, moved to South Carolina, moved to Texas, moved to Arizona. People are leaving, and they're leaving because of taxes, and they're leaving because of crime, and they're leaving because of other affordability issues related to utilities and stuff like that. People can't take it anymore. Yeah. So I'm a Democrat, and I'm talking about crime and taxes. You know why? Because Democrats care about crime and taxes too. They can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
So of course, and I think there is a good point, Congressman Suozzi, where the nature of if something comes from the federal level, it's kind of an equal playing field versus as if it comes just from the state, maybe because the U.S. Congress and Senate can't pass it, then it's anti-competitive. Then, like you said, it's putting one state maybe for some benefit, but potentially at a disadvantage. And people say, well, let me move to Pennsylvania, let me move, like you said, to North Carolina, etc. So that is certainly an essential thing to consider. Go ahead,
I think the concrete thing is definitely taxes. People see their tax bill. That's the crime issue. Listen, there was a story about a guy out in like Peoria, Illinois, and he said, if you want people here, I could make people here think that this is the crime capital of the world. Just give me a couple of weeks with my newspaper, and I can do that. So the crime thing, I mean, some people come in and say we're the safest county, and then somebody else comes in and says, the crime is that.
Long
to me,
Island is so much safer than it is in the city.
But to me, that's a campaign thing, because it slides up and down depending on which side of the coin the person is on.
New York City,
we do have a crime problem.
There really is a crime problem.
Right,
I mean,
but if I put a microscope on it,
Long Island, we're very safe compared to.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, this is not the Wild West. We've talked about that with the police commissioner.
No,
this
is certain parts of your district on the Queens side too. Where obviously it stretches a little bit further, but it's not maybe the same as other areas of the city where there are kind of more high density incidents of crime. But that all said,
I just think I got to tell you,
reform in this second bill.
Yeah.
we'll have time for it, but let's get just into your insight on decision to run for governor. I know, again, obviously, like you said, redistricting.
Yeah, right.
There is news right now about
Nothing to do with
actually.
redistricting. That has
No,
nothing
I'm
to
saying
do
they
with
can.
it.
Yeah, no,
If
I
anything,
understand.
they made the seat safer. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
The
right.
congressional lines are now being challenged. Was my point. It seems like the state and maybe the assembly might, be able to stay, but they're in the appeals going to keep moving up regarding the
they
congressional line.
gerrymandered the seats. I mean, there's no question about that. They gerrymandered. They're trying to get the Democrats saw the Republicans screw us down in Texas and other places, and they increased the Republican seats unfairly in those places. And they said, "Oh, it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. We're going to do it here in New York. We're going to increase the Democratic seats." I mean, so they gerrymandered. So I mean, that's just
understood.
so whether they follow the law or not.
Of course, and that will be played out in the courts, obviously, and that's what we will continue to follow reporting on. But in terms of the balance of Congress, I know that's something that we raised, and I know people obviously were bringing to your attention. Do you think that's credible, or do you think that, again, likely it'll be a safe Democrat? I know there was a challenger, I believe, a Republican, Santos, who got somewhat close, but
no, he didn't get close. He didn't get close. That was all based upon the absentee ballots. I buried him in that election.
It was the Red Mirage. I know people talked about that.
So the bottom line is that my seat's going to stay Democratic, I believe. And whether we're going to be in the minority or the majority is irrelevant to me. I got a lot done when I was in the minority. I did some big things when I first got into Congress. I was in the minority. I'm leaving Congress. It's a great honor, great responsibility. I'm good at it. I got great relationships. I'm a congressman. I mean, it's kind of a big deal. I'm on great committees. I'm on Ways and Means. I'm on this Executive Commission on China. I was appointed by the Speaker. It's a great thing. It's awesome.
It's a lot to give up.
It's a lot to give up. And I've given it up because I feel so strongly about how bad things are in New York and how I want my voice to be heard on so many issues, even national issues. My voice will be heard more if I'm the governor of New York State than if I'm the member of Congress, because I'm just so sick of the fact that, look at all the issues we have not addressed for 30 years.
Well,
climate change, immigration, healthcare, gun violence. I mean, and I know what's wrong. I know how politics works and why it doesn't work. Having done it 8 years as mayor, 8 years as county executive, 5.5 years in Congress now. I'm trained as a CPA. I'm trained as an attorney. I know how to make government work. And I feel that everything I've done in my life has prepared me for this particular job at this particular time. And let me just say, you guys know my story pretty much. My father was born in Italy. Okay.
Yep.
My grandparents are from Italy. On my mother's side, my grandmother was born in England. My grandfather was an electrician for the local 3 union. He put the lights on top of the Empire State Building. I grew up looking at my parents, and I was like, wow, my grandparents, immigrants. My father's an immigrant. They all lived through the Depression.
Right.
My dad fought in World War II. My mom, lived through the Depression. She was a nurse. I saw a picture of my dad campaigning with John F. Kennedy growing up. I still have it in my office.
Wow.
And my parents were involved in the civil rights movement in the 60s and, trying to change the world. And I always thought to myself, what am I going to do with my life that I'm going to try and make my contribution back? I didn't immigrate. Didn't live through the Depression. I didn't fight in World War II. I didn't, I wasn't there in the 60s to change the world. What am I going to do? So I've always tried to do that. Mayor, county executive, Congress, my private life. I've always tried to live up to their example. But I feel like right now is such a crisis of democracy, a crisis of hope, a crisis of our state, a crisis of my Democratic Party that is not talking to the people about the things they care about, which I believe are crime and taxes, that I feel like this is what I've got to do. This is what I'm going to do. This is my big moment to try and really do something to help people. And so I'm risking it all. And I believe in it strongly. And I'm running on being, 1, a proven executive who gets things done. Number 2, a common sense Democrat. I'm not going to pander to the left. I'm not going to back down to the right. I'm going to work with anybody to get things done. And number 3, my agenda is very clear. Crime, taxes, kids in troubled schools to help lift those kids up, and now corruption.
Yeah.
So,
I think in the future that, or even now, your biggest, I guess, the biggest thing against you is the propaganda. A lot of elected officials say, well, we want to work together. Okay, that's fine. I read a chilling quote the other day that just said, democracy depends on agreed upon truths. Autocracy on agreed upon lies.
Yes.
Now
very good.
we have a lot of that bad yeast in the bread of America. That's democracy. Now, how do you work with somebody that believes something that's totally off the rails, and yet
Well,
they are all around?
Often you can't work with those people. You got to find the people that you can work with. I mean, the whole culture is corrupted right now. As far as did you guys see the video of that kid that was arrested up in Syracuse?
Syracuse, yes, I did.
Hey, he was a little kid. He's 8 years old, black kid, arrested for stealing potato chips.
Bag of potato chips, yeah.
And now, if you trust the cops, you're like, well, I want to scare my kid straight. I don't want him stealing at the store. They're going to bring the kid home to the parents. I'm glad we're going to shake him up a little bit, and he's going to know what right and wrong is. If you trust the cops, like, thanks for doing that, officers. I appreciate you getting my kid straight.
Right.
If you don't trust the cops, you're like, what are you picking on that kid for?
Yep.
You're harassing him. You're terrorizing him.
Kid.
You're ruining this kid's life.
Yep.
It's the same thing with the teachers. Okay. With the Florida law on the gay issue.
Don't say gay, right?
So if you trust the teachers, you say, well, I would like if a kid comes to school and a kid's got two mommies and two daddies, I'd like the teacher to explain, that you have to respect people and respect their differences and help them and help the kids to, even you push the issue off a little bit, and the parents can take care of it later when they get home and when they get a little bit older. Right. You trust the teachers to stop the kid from being bullied or feel out of place.
Yeah.
If you don't trust the teachers, you say, what are you trying to fill my kid's head with that stuff for?
You're indoctrinating my
children.
Right.
You're teaching about stuff they shouldn't be hearing. What are you doing? So we've created this culture in our society where you can't even talk to each other about things.
Nope.
You can't work on things because you don't trust anybody. And I said this 40 years ago. The goal of evil is that we not trust each other anymore. Because when everybody else is bad and you can't trust anybody, you can't follow anybody. You can't get any better. You can't follow a movement because you can't trust anybody to move forward. When all the politicians are no good, even George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, well, they were racist. They had slaves. They're no good. And then all the sports players, well, Mickey Mantle was a drunk and Babe Ruth was too fat. Then these guys did drugs. They're no good.
Back to propaganda. Back to propaganda.
Lawyers, what do you call 500 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A good start. All the lawyers.
Right.
The doctors, manage care. They don't care about anybody, and they're no good. And the priests, well, they're either stealing from the coffers or they got sex problems or pedophiles.
Yeah.
Nobody's any good anymore.
No, the generalizations and seeing the world only in black and white, leaves people to not have empathy and a lot of nuanced understandings of the complexities that obviously are at play and that people should be trying to just deal with and address and figure out as a community. So understand that, and I know you did clarify some of the statements you made on another radio show this week. You said that some of your statements were inartful after the host kind of posed it in a certain way, the question regarding talking about genitalia, and then ultimately
you want your kids taught by a teacher about sex and genitalia? I said, no.
Who's doing that? Now this is what I mean by propaganda.
The question was misleading in a way because that's not what the law does. The law says you can't even talk to the kids about anything. So I had to come out firmly and say I'm against the law and I'm against DeSantis and I'm against. But you can't even have these conversations and people are going to manipulate you.
No, and it goes back to, is that the intention of a host, for an audience, or is that kind of just the misperception of someone who's, reading into...
That's a lawyer in a courtroom asking someone on the stand, Mr. Jones, when did you stop beating your wife?
Right.
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Makes sense. So understood, but just, had to be mentioned,
Let me
obviously.
Just be clear. I have a 100% rating from the Human Rights Campaign, which is, I've always been supportive of LGBTQ families. I wrote a letter in favor of same-sex marriage back to the New York Times, an op-ed piece in 2009. I got beaten up by my bishop for that. I've always have a strong record on LGBT issues. I've got a solid. People are trying to say Tom Suozzi is a Dino Democrat in NAMO. I have a 100% rating from the from the League of Conservation Voters. I was the League of Conservation Voters a person of the environmentalist of the year.
But see, you shouldn't even have to waste your time. You shouldn't even have to waste your time answering those things. That's what I mean.
I'm a lifelong Democrat. I have an F rating from the NRA. I have 100. I'm the chair of the Labor Caucus in Congress. So I just feel, even though I'm a Democrat, I'm talking about crime and taxes because that's what people care about.
You got to bring it back to
taxes.
No, understood. Understood.
Yep.
Certainly, let's get into again some of those disagreements with Governor Hochul's policies and what we see here at the state in a second. But let's remind our listeners they are listening to this week's Long Island News 90.3 WHPC, the radio voice of Nassau Community College. Here with Bill McIntyre, myself, Jon Gallo, and thankfully joined by Congressman Tom Suozzi, who currently represents the 3rd Congressional District here on Long Island, and is of course, running to be governor of the state of New York. So to that point, knowing, and I guess, Earth Day, we do want to talk about a lot of, the kind of track record you do have on environmental issues, because that's an important thing to consider. And I know you brought out points of contrast with Governor Hochul's record, be it with the NRA, be it with, other types of, nonprofit organizations and advocacy groups and her government work. So I guess, maybe, just with the budget, let's go into the budget. It's probably going to take a little bit more time. I wanted
Well,
to get on.
let me just
Go
say,
ahead.
John, because I didn't say it before, but you
Please.
just mentioned it, okay? I have an F rating from the NRA. When she was in the Congress, she had an A rating from the NRA, and she was endorsed by the NRA. I have a 100% rating from the League of Conservation Voters. In her first year in Congress, she had a 50% rating from the League of Conservation Voters. I was the New York Immigration Coalition's Person of the Year for helping the undocumented and kicking ICE out of Nassau County when I was county executive. She said when she was Erie County clerk, I'm against driver's licenses for the undocumented. If anybody tries to come to my clerk's office who's undocumented, I'll report them to ICE. Yeah. So that's clear differences between she. And now, those were far right positions she used to have. Now, when she picked her lieutenant governor, his main campaign issue was defund the police in New York City. And she endorsed a socialist in Queens, and she's got the socialist in her administration doing intergovernmental affairs. So I don't know what she believes in, because she used to be far right, and now she's going far left. And I believe that she just will do anything to get elected and pander.
No, understood. And, I think maybe we will stick on the lieutenant governor point, obviously, because that's very important right now. And I know you made your pick, Miss, I believe, Diana Reyna, who was, I believe, a council member in New York City, a Latina, who certainly, people have looked at her track record and, see her as a candidate that even the governor might consider on potentially poaching from you. But
she was the deputy borough president to Eric Adams, also in Brooklyn.
Yes, of course. And knowing, that's kind of a lot of the discussion that's going on right now, with the mess of the corruption scandal that is, Brian Benjamin now facing, federal corruption charges. I guess, what my thought is, though, before we dig into what currently is there, did you ever have any thought of picking a progressive running mate? Because to your previous point, because people do question, Governor Hochul's political kind of, we'll say, I don't know, just the ability to stay consistent, switching from where she was running upstate in Western New York to now, being the governor and trying to appease, like you said, more maybe liberal populations. People have that concern maybe a little bit on you going the other way, where, you have a very big, progressive background, but, you're kind of moving towards the right here, at least, as it's been reported, to try to get a different maybe voting block.
I say that I'm a common sense Democrat. I'm very progressive on immigration and on the environment, and I'm fiscally moderate. I think we're spending too much money. I think we're in trouble financially. I think people can't take the taxes anymore. Diana Reyna is pretty progressive. She has a very progressive background, working on economic development and working on affordable housing, working on lifting people up and making sure there's diversity in government. I have a very good record on diversity in government as well. People forget the fact that I appointed an African-American police commissioner that came out of New York City Police Department. And Keechant Sewell, who's now the commissioner of police in New York City, came out of Nassau County's police department, and she was promoted up in the ranks by the commissioner that I put in place, because he was promoting African-Americans, Black and brown people up through the ranks to make Nassau County Police Department more diverse. I had two African-American deputy county executives for economic development. I had a Latina commissioner of health, a Latina commissioner of mental health. I've always tried to make my government look like the people I represent, because I believe in that.
Understood. Understood. So to that point, you believe that you had enough progressive credibility and history that you didn't really need to consider kind of a unity ticket, as some people might have thought of,
She's very progressive. I said I was going to work very hard to pick a woman of color. And Diana Reyna, when she's elected a lieutenant governor, will be the first Latina or Latino elected statewide in the history of New York State.
Yeah, which would be a big deal, of course.
And my campaign chair is Fernando Ferrer, the former Bronx borough president, also Latino.
Yes. And let's just point out that again. So there are other opponents in that race, being Ana Maria Archia, who is running with Jumaane Williams, and ultimately we're going to see what happens here. Brian Benjamin will still be apparently on the ballot in the primaries because, as it seems, the legislature won't be passing any type of fix. So that still has to get played out.
She created this mess. She's got to fix it. I mean, the bottom line is this was picking Brian Benjamin as her lieutenant governor was the governor's first decision. It's completely up to her. Nobody else had a say in it. It was all up to her 100%.
Right.
There were things swirling around him with controversy back in January of 2021. When he was announced, the reporters all asked about, well, what about these different ethical issues related to paying for his wedding with his campaign funds, related to traveling back and forth to Albany and using campaign funds and getting reimbursed by the government. And this issue with the straw donor that he ultimately got indicted for. Then it came out in November that he hadn't filled out that he had been subpoenaed by the federal government on his background check. That was out there in November. And the governor, as recently as a week before he was arrested, tripled down on saying, I'm with Brian Benjamin. He's great. In fact, she assigned him, the guy who's in, forget about all this ethical stuff. He was a defund the police guy. The guy that was defund the police, she selected him not only to be her running mate, but her chief negotiator on the issue of bail reform. I mean, come on. What are you thinking?
Yeah,
so
obviously.
It's very telling about her judgment or lack of judgment and her inexperience. I don't think we don't have much more time.
No.
I just want people to remember the 5 B's, okay? Brian Benjamin, bail reform, which she completely gave away the store on that. She did not accomplished anything to address the crime issue. The budget, increased spending enormously so that she could get the 4th B, which was the Buffalo Bills Stadium, $1 billion giveaway for her friends that was given to the taxpayers 4 days before the budget was due, and after secretive negotiations. There was no public hearing about it whatsoever, and it's the most lucrative tax giveaway in the NFL's history. And finally, bad judgment.
Wow.
And the Bill Stadium, I know you raised the point. I was listening to another interview you were on, and just the nature of it not being in the downtown area, it not being attached to other types of developments, it being over in Orchard Park. I spent a lot of time, went to undergrad at University at Buffalo, and know that area certainly could be in need of some more revitalization. And if you're going to spend the money, maybe somewhere like that would have made sense. And I know you talked about also the Belmont Arena here, where that wasn't funded.
Paid for all by the developers, except for the Long Island Railroad.
In the same way,
and they made money because they're building retail alongside it, and that'll create economic development for downtown Elmont. It'll lift the area up.
Yep.
You could
we'll all get the opportunity to see exactly what the results of that are going to be over time. The first initial problem was the poor people of Floral Park dealing with people parking across their driveways, because it costs you $40, I think, now to park at that UBS when you go to a show or go to a game.
I went over to the Nassau Coliseum the other day. It was like that crazy. Was it $40 or was it $25? It was some. I thought it was just an enormous number.
Yeah.
To go park was like, what?
Yeah.
In any event,
parking lot prices too.
We have the clock on the wall ticking, and I've got a producer jumping up and down saying it's time for us to go.
All right, guys.
Certainly,
we could talk to you for another 2 or 3 hours.
Proven executive, common sense Democrat, crime, taxes, and troubled schools, and let's stop the corruption in the most corrupt state in the United States of America.
And
bingo, there you go.
People find out more about your campaign, how they can get involved.
Suozzi for NY, please help us. I need the people. With the people, I'll win this thing, and we'll turn around the state and take it back for the people.
Beautiful. Let's rock and roll.
And again, happy Earth Day to you, and certainly, you have a good track record on that. We'll have to talk about that another time, I guess.
Thank
you so much for being with us.
Thanks for spending some time with us.
Great to talk with both of you. Happy Earth Day.
You too.
Definitely.
You too. Be well.
Thanks. Luck on the trail.
Well, okay, John.
All right, Bill.
The clock on the wall. The clock on the wall says it's time for this week's Long Island News to move on out of here. We thank you for joining us. Remind you can catch this week's Long Island News every Friday right here on 90.3 at 3 p.m. And hey, we'll see you next time. Same place.